what a joy to shoot. I love history. I love military history. There's nothing better than U.S. military history. And here we've got a M1903A3 Springfield 30-06 rifle. These were adopted in 1905 by the U.S. military and were the standard issue rifle until 1937, which of course was replaced by the M1 Garand, which is a semi-automatic 30-06. Designed in the 30-06 caliber, a devastating rifle, highly accurate, very reliable on the battlefield, all through World War I, and even saw service up until Vietnam. A couple of really fascinating things about this rifle was it was the first time the U.S. standardized their issue rifle to all military. Before that, there were different rifles for different branches of the military. And so the M103 became the standard issued rifle. Another thing that the Springfield M103 did was it did away with the rifle carbine with the two rifles. It went to one 24-inch barreled rifle that suited both purposes. And a lot of this had to do with the Germans and the British already going along that doctrine. Now, this is the M1903A3, made by Springfield. Of course, during the war, many other companies made these, made parts for them. This specific rifle is a Remington-made rifle. It is in about the 4 million serial number range. There were many, obviously, millions of these rifles made, but from World War I all the way up until 1944, these were in production. This is the model M1903A3. And one of the advances of this rifle was the sight. They put a rear aperture sight similar to that of the Garand, and that allowed for cross-training for those that had been trained on the Garand to still be able to use these rifles. But the early models, the early A1 models, had the traditional bolt-action front sight here with a leaf, like you normally see still on rifles, and was used predominantly during World War II. Here's a little closer look of the sight itself. It does have a very small aperture, and that was designed that way because it really increased the accuracy. Of course, you have your windage and elevation right here built in. A very nice rear sight. Now, the front post, as you can see, is not hooded, but that's one of the things that the Marine Corps did. They took their rifles and hooded this front sight to keep it protected. There is a little brass bead on the tip. Now, while I was shooting this rifle at the range, I did notice sometimes it was difficult to see that front sight in this very small aperture. Now, these rifles are not lightweight. They're about 8 pounds and 11 ounces. But really, they handle extremely well. There's just something about the way these things move around. A lot of the design features came into this rifle because of the Spanish-American War and the forces faced in Cuba, which were shooting Mausers. This is really what led to the birth of the Springfield M1903A3. Now, of course, we have the turn-down bolt, which is really nice. Of course, it is unloaded. You can feed 5 rounds either by stripper clip or singularly, just with pushing down. One of the things I'll show you is there is a block. In fact, when this is pulled back on an empty chamber, you can't move it forward. Of course, that alerted the soldier when he was firing that his gun was empty. But one of the things that they've done here to block the system here for the stripper clips, there's this button right here, and what happens is when it's pushed down, it will not come back all the way, so a stripper clip cannot be fed. This is 1 round at a time. Okay. Here is the safety. Written right across here means ready. Of course, on this side it says safe. It completely disables the firing pin. Okay, when we charge the bolt, you notice that the bolt is going to come back and cock. So it's in cocked position. When this is extended, it's cocked position. You can place your finger in the trigger holding this bolt, which this is somewhat dangerous to do if you have a round in the chamber, but since we're empty, we're going to just demonstrate it. Hold back the bolt, pull the trigger and you can release it to put it in a non-firing position. Your safety will not engage at this point, but this allows for the tension of the bolt to be released without firing the weapon. Look at the machining on this rifle. It is beautiful. Absolutely incredible rifle. This is a really beautiful specimen, by the way. It does have a boxed magazine that's fixed inside and with the plate here. Here is the bayonet attachment with a attachment for your strap up front, or here, attachment to the rear as well. Here's the buttstock, comes up over the back of the bolt, and then it has a trap door for your cleaning supplies. Nice crisscross pattern on it. Now reportedly these rifles were sighted in at 2,500 yards, and point blank was considered 500 yards. That's when riflemen were riflemen. These are incredible little rifles, a lot of fun to shoot, and just a really classic piece of history. Now, while in 1937 the Garand took preeminence over all other rifles, because they were still trying to get these rifles ready for frontline use, the M1903 was still in combat. In fact, all through World War II. And a lot of the U.S. Army Rangers actually preferred the bolt-action rifle for many of the specialized combat operations that they were involved in. Because of the shortage of arms during the war, there were many irregular units were outfitted with these M1903s. The Free French were also, in fact, they preferred this rifle after France was liberated and given many thousands of these to help drive the Germans out of France. The Brazilian units in Italy also predominantly used these really fine rifles. Now I do want to make mention of the M1903A4, and that was the first attempt by the U.S. Army to standardize a sniper rifle. And they put on a Weaver 2.2 power scope, removed the sights, and one of the problems was the scope was really underpowered and it wasn't waterproof. And the big problem with that is that if the scope was inoperable, you had no sights and the rifle was useless. The U.S. military came up with a universal scope that was 8 power, and they had some success with it over what the Army did. But really, the M1903 was never really considered an adequate sniper rifle, even though it was used up through Vietnam. The Springfield M1903A3 is just an incredible piece of history and a lot of fun to shoot and great to collect. And as always, thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more fun gun reviews and sensible survival. God bless America. Long live the Republic. Them there German boys learned a lot about this rifle right here, all the way from World War I to World War II. You don't want to be on this end of this rifle.